The technology of belief is among the most important technologies to understand in order to facilitate the sustainable generation of human well-being, the enterprise we're all focused on throughout history. So let's look at it from a couple of different angles. Now, the first thing to understand is that there are two realities. There's the cultural reality, and then there's the underlying ecological reality. Now, the underlying ecological reality is physics, photosynthesis, oxygen generation from trees, all of the things that are going on in the planet, the solar system, the universe, we have as an underlying reality. Now, the cultural reality and the cult mode of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, the cult identity, is built on the foundation of the underlying physical reality. And it's important to both note that they are two distinct realities and to understand that while a cult can reward its people by withholding and dispensing love and belonging, security of survival and survival, these are in the domain of the cult. Any parent can smother, suffocate, torment, traumatize their child for one behavior and reward them in another. And so in order to survive, the infant very rapidly attunes to the cult. It attunes to the top reality. And the top reality supports its identity, its pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, by punishing conformity or punishing deviation and rewarding conformity to the cult. And so we have the adjustment period and the fitting in to the cult. And very soon you give if you give a 1-month-old infant to any cult in history or around the planet, if you give a 1-month infant to a Japanese family, within 10 years that infant will speak Japanese, will not speak any of the other languages, regardless of where they were born, will eat tofu and sashimi or whatever it is that that family is feeding it. They will watch Japanese media, they will drive in Japanese cars, they will have donned the cloak of cult identity. And if you give the exact same 1-month-old infant to an American family, an Australian family, a Thai family, they will speak Thai, eat Thai, bow down to Buddha in a Thai temple, etc., etc. Because a child, an infant, cannot withstand the overwhelming mass of giants in their environment rewarding X, Y, and Z, and punishing, frowning, scowling, looking away, not rewarding, Z, Y, and B. So this force imposes the cult identity on every infant. As such, the cult identity is among the most important technologies. Now, what belief is a shortcut. It's a heuristic model of reality. And as someone choosing one's beliefs, one's defaults would be another way to put it, one has to decide first and foremost, do you, in the areas that the cult and the underlying ecology diverge, do you pick your cult or do you pick the underlying ecology? Because a certain percentage of every cult is based on dogma. And dogma just means that it's self-referential rather than data-based. Because if someone says it's warm outside and you go outside and feel that it's warm, you don't need a dogma to support that underlying reality, because the words and the underlying reality are integrated. But if someone says that it's warm outside and you go outside and it's freezing cold and you get frostbite, bitten within, 30 seconds, then you need a dogma to sustain that version of reality, because the data doesn't support it. And so that's where you need things like traumatic punishment. You need things like because I said so. You need things to be done because that's the way we do things, and that's why we do things. It's a self-referential loop because there is no substantial data that supports that it's warm outside when the evidence is to the contrary. Now, cults that say this is the best way to be educated, this is the best diet to eat, this is the best way to run the economy, this is the best way to do the government, this is how we do things, this is how we parent. In almost every single area, there's a divergence between best practice in the underlying reality and data set and the way that is maintained by the status quo. There's a discrepancy between what the science says is the single most competent way to educate someone and how we're actually educating someone. What the science says is the single most competent way to parent someone and how we in our cult are parenting. What the science says about the single most competent way to date and explore relationship, and what we're actually doing in the cult as a dating and relationship meme. And so there's this gap. And as an infant, we are reattuned from our bodies and the underlying reality that we emerge out of, physics and nature, etc., to the dogmas of the cult. And these are the two ecologies, the cult ecology and the underlying physical or mathematical reality. And in some ways, we may need two different sets of beliefs or decide whether to base the belief on the cult or on the underlying reality in the areas, the many areas where they are divergent. Now, every cult has to have some tether to the underlying reality. And we can see that with, for example, every human being on the planet who has ever been on the planet requires a certain amount of protein and food. Now, a cult can spin a great deal of cult dogma in a tremendous variety of ways. But if a certain amount of food doesn't make it into the body of its people, if its dogma is too far removed from the underlying reality, the cult dies. And 95% of all cults are dead. They did not serve their people well enough. They diverged too far from reality. And so they're dead. They didn't survive their pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and doing and being, ended up killing enough of their people relative to the other cult memes on the planet that they are no more. So cults don't have a good rep because 95% of them die. And that means that 1,000 years from now, there's a 95% chance that our cult, the things that we do say, be and feel, that those memes will be dead as well. And this is a good thing because for evolution to occur, old patterns need to be let go of, and new patterns need to be developed, co-created, and invoked. And so there's always been cults or cultures, but they're always changing. They're always moving. And one culture consumes another culture just like one species consumes another species, or one animal consumes another animal. There's a recycling or digesting process in which life, which in all likelihood is present in all of it. See, if your life, you win every war. If your life, you win every competition, because you are the winner and you are the loser. But if the loser is consumed and the winner grows and you are the winner, well, you win big if you are life. You grow and become more all the time if you're life. And evolution is your tool for realizing your potential if you are life. Because life's potential is really, really big, as evidenced by the fact that in only 24 billion years, life has taken a little bit of energy this big out of, according to our scientists, nothing at all. And poof, now we have the multiverse, the universe, the galaxy, the solar system, the planet, and all the species that exist and have ever existed on this planet in only 24 billion years. And life's just getting started. What will life do, be, say, feel? How will life look in another 1,000 billion years? We're only 24 billion. See, and life is not in a hurry because life doesn't have a deadline, because life has all of the time that it needs to become all of the things that it can be, wants to be, could be, in an ever-increasing amount of space, with an endless variety of technologies through which to realize its potential. Life is always winning. Whether you lose or you win, life is present in the winner and the loser. And when one part goes down, you can think of it economically as well. When one company is driven out of business and the customers move to a new company that offers more value at a lower price, life wins. Life wins in the growth of the superior company, and life wins in the abundance of better served clients. Life always wins. And if life makes a wrong turn, because part of evolution is experimentation, iteration, mutation, and not all of life's experiments and mutations become the dominant meme. Instead, many of them die off. Well, we tried that, and that didn't work out very well, but we also tried a billion other things simultaneously. Life has a big laboratory, and its success, its recipes are self-evident. I mean, one doesn't have to interview life to see if it is capable of investing energy, because the interview would go something like this. Hello, life. So what have you been doing the last 24 billion years? Well, I started off this big, less than the size of a pea. That was my starting block. And that wasn't very big, so I got a lot bigger. And I diversified and diversified again. You know, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. So I just keep creating more basket and more eggs and more things. And then I combine things and see what happens, right? And sometimes really amazing things happen and I do more of that. And other times nothing happens and so I don't do more of that, right? And I've been doing that in a growing experiment over the last 24 billion years. I've now got more than 1 billion life-affirming planets that you know about so far. I've got this universe and several other universes, just in case this one doesn't work out, that you don't know about, but I do, because, I've always got something up my sleeve. And, in 24 billion years, we've created planets and solar systems and light and energy. I've experimented with different laws of gravity and this, and I've got this great recipe, and it just keeps producing more life. Every single year, there's more of this and more of that. And you humans think that, red Ninja Turtles, etc., have nothing to do with me, but I created you. You were one of my experiments, and you're creating an endless variety of interesting patterns of energy, and maybe some of them will survive and move on to other planets in time, and if they don't, oh well, it's very interesting to watch you, but that's what I've been doing for the last 24 billion years. And if you've noticed in the last several hundred years, you see some exponential curves like Moore's law in computing, and it's an interesting phenomena to facilitate a whole intranet and connect a planet. Maybe I'll do that on a few other planets in the next billion years, copy this and do that because it's working over here. But I've done all this in only 24 billion years. Why not invest with life? We'll take your seed capital and we'll grow it into a universe with compound interest. It's guaranteed to win because I always win, because I bet on the winners and I bet on the losers, and I bet more on the winners. And so here I am 24 billion years later. Now, what have you got to say? Who else are you talking to, and where else would you want to invest your money? Well, there is no investor on the planet. I think Warren Buffett is great because for 50 years he's delivered a 3,000, % return on investment or whatever it is his stats are. That's nothing on life. So, you've got to hand it to life because life's just getting started. Where will we be in 1 trillion years? Where will life be? Now, we'll be dead, and our energy will be continually recycled and upcycled into more and more complex forms of energy, as dictated by life's algorithm. Life's algorithm dictates that there is no waste. Life never wastes a single iota of atoms. Not a single bit, not a single subatomic particle is wasted. Instead, all energy is upcycled. It changes from one form to another form, 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 evolutionarily, expanding its intelligence endlessly, endlessly. Which means we're all destined to be maybe 10, 20, 30 billion years into the future, maybe 10, 20 trillion years into the future. We're all destined to be part of something grand, something more complex, something more interesting than we are today. Because what we are is energy, part of life's little plan, right? And when we let go of what we are now, eventually we'll find ourselves a part of something bigger. Now, we may not recognize and find it useful to recognize this pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Every single asset is at one point a bleeding edge in technology, at another point the mediocre norm, and then becomes a liability. Every form is on a bell curve of adoption and evolution, and so over time, whatever form we have will, if we hold on long enough, go from being a growth point, an accomplishment, to a liability, to a curse. Because the curse is the thing that holds you in the past, that holds you back. I'm going to always be loyal to a horse and buggy, right? One thing, it was this great innovation, horses and buggies, you can ride a horse. It was the most amazing thing. Wow, I didn't know. Well, and you go faster. And at one point, horses and buggies were this wonderful thing. And then cars came along. And then electric cars came along. And wouldn't you know, in the next trillion years, something else is going to come along, and it's going to be big. You haven't seen anything yet. So in this context, all of this is going on, and what I've just manufactured is a series of beliefs, a series of assumptions, and a heuristic model for dealing with reality. And that model has been iterating and evolving inside the human species. You could think of humanity as a tissue culture in which life is trying out different algorithms, different models for relating to reality. And some models of relating to reality do better than others. It's 8 billion tissue samples. Now, a lot of the models start off as the core tissue based on the cult reproductive pattern of, all children adopt their cult. So, you have that beginning starting point, but then people go through adolescence, which is nature's great all bets are off rebellion, right? Fuck this, I'm not doing what I was told. You don't know anything, da-da-da. So this is the breakaway point. This is going into orbit as an iterative rebellion occurs. New life is born. I'm rejecting the status quo so that I can what? Become a new pattern, become a new identity, a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And the question is it going to be a more intelligent pattern or a less intelligent pattern than my parents, than my cult, than that which I'm rebelling against? And some of that has to do with whether or not we know, whether or not we're competent in applying the technology of belief. And so let's look at let's look at one model for applying the technology of belief. So step one in kind of understanding this model is understanding that what a belief does is it captures a pattern of reality. And so let's say reality goes like this. The sun comes up, it gets warmer. The sun goes down, it gets colder. The sun comes up, it gets warmer. Sun goes down, it gets colder. Sun goes up, it gets warmer. And we have a pattern. Now, if I believe this pattern, and what this is it's an observation, it's a focus of consciousness, where I'm taking some part of reality And I'm inventing a language, a paradigm, a language through which to communicate, to understand a cycle. And all cycles are circular, but it's simpler. It's simpler to kind of reduce them to a polarity, like up and down, hot and cold, day and night. It's simpler than breaking the 24-hour cycle into, for example, 1 billion different increments, which can easily be done. You have, in fact, always a circle going on in every day, every year, and the circle is not the simplicity of black and white. It's as many distinct points on that circle as your language, as your mind cares to invent. And simple minds like simple models of reality. So we'll express this circle as a simple up and down, black and white, hot and cold. And so if I have a belief that says the sun warms things up, and therefore when it goes away, it will usually be cooler, that belief is useful. And so so we invent a belief that captures a pattern of energy. The belief is that the sun warms things up. And therefore, when the sun rises, it gets warmer. When the sun goes down, it gets cooler. And that's the belief. Now, this is not a perfect belief. You know that because there are certain instances where the sun rises and it gets cooler. But it's right most of the time. If you placed 100 bets around the world randomly that every time the sun rises up, you'd win most of them. And that's what we're trying to do with a belief. We're betting on the future. That's what a belief is. We're betting on the future. And what we want to do is create a winning bet. So a belief captures a pattern that contains a piece of reality. And it's significant, and most of us are aware that things get warm when the sun comes out and cooler when the sun goes down. And it's useful if it allows us to predict the future in such a way that allows us to have a more sustainable relationship with the underlying reality or with the cultural overlay on top. If the belief helps us have a more sustainable relationship. So what is a sustainable relationship? Well, it means that we gain more energy from the relationship than we expend. For example, a sustainable relationship with food is one where it takes 10% of my energy to walk to the fridge and eat something, and the food gives me 100% energy back minus the 10% of walking to the fridge. So I get a net profit from that adventure to the refrigerator of 90% return on investment. I have all my energy back and I only had to walk 30 feet to the fridge. Now, what's an unsustainable relationship with reality? Well, I set out on the hunt, right? And I'm already hungry because I've been practicing bow and arrow and stuff like that. I set out on the hunt. And I walk for 3 nights and 3 days. And I am exhausted. I've burned, 20% of my body fat, whatever it is. So I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I've burned 20% of my body fat. And then I spy a squirrel, right? I spy a squirrel, I take aim, I hit the squirrel, I spend another 3 hours gathering firewood and this and that and the other, and I roast the squirrel. And having spent 3 days worth of energy, I now get back 10% of that energy with the protein from one squirrel. Well, that's an unsustainable reality. And so a belief enables a pattern of engagement with reality that is either useful or unuseful. Now, if you repeat that pattern, where you consume 3 days of energy and get 10% of it back, consume another 3 days of energy, get 10% of it back, you die in a month or so. And with it, your belief system. It's not sustainable. And then the table is open, right? The field is open for someone else to have a more intelligent belief system, a belief that generates more energy per unit of energy expended in sustainable well-being, of course, beginning with oxygen and food and warmth, etc. So it's useful if it helps us evolve a more sustainable relationship with the underlying reality of the cult or of physics. Now, next thing to understand, point 3 to understand, is that all beliefs are limited. So if I say, for example, when the sun rises, it'll get warmer. That will be true, except what if there's a cold front coming in and the sun rose right at the point that the cold front came in? Well, then that belief is too limited to capture the complexity of reality. So all beliefs are too limited to capture the entire complexity of reality. Beliefs are like maps. So if you use a Google map and say, I want to drive from San Francisco to Palo Alto, the Google map will be useful most of the time, precisely because the Google map ignores 99.9% of reality. What it focuses on is a heuristic model of streets. And the Google map doesn't say, this is 10 million atoms worth of asphalt. It just says, this is Highway 280, this is Highway 1. And it keeps things very simple. And it focuses on a very, very limited subsection of reality. And so it's not reality. It says, we're driving on Highway 1. That's a lie. Meaning we're not driving on that little gray line on a screen. We're not even just driving on Highway 1. We are suspended in atmosphere. We're spinning around the world at 24,000 miles of whatever it is. We're doing lots of complex things that are not captured in the model we construct with language, with computers, with beliefs, to deal with a dumbed down version of reality that helps us, in this case, get to our destination. So it's useful, but it is limited in scope. You will never see on Google Map a reading that says, 2,300 ants 20 meters to the left. Now, they could hire people to go around and find ants and count them and send that to Google Maps. But we're not interested. And Google would go bankrupt if it began creating truly complex maps of reality that people are not willing to pay for. They want to know where the streets are. They do not want to know how many ants are 20 meters to the left over here and here. And so it's not an accurate map of reality. It's limited in scope. Now, the next thing to understand is that different beliefs, point 4, capture different elements of reality by highlighting different patterns. So this pattern here is good at capturing the sun and the night, that pattern. But it's not so good at capturing fog, is it? Now, it may correlate. It may say most of the time there's a fog more often at night or more often in the day. So it could then say 60% of the time there's a fog up here and clarity down here. You could do an overlay, but that's a different belief, right? That's a different expectation, because a belief is also an expectation. It's a bet on the future. Now, no belief is right 100% of the time. and no belief covers the entire scope of reality. So beliefs are narrow, and they're not always right. But they're still useful if they predict a useful area of reality to you that allows you to predict the future in a useful area most of the time. They're wonderful if they're right most of the time in the areas that matter to you. And so that's an intelligent belief system. Now, why have a belief system? Why not just get up in the morning and say, let's see what happens? Oh my goodness, the sun came up, it's warm. Oh my goodness, the sun went down, it's cool. Let's see what happens next, right? Well, that's a very wonderful life. Never know what's happening next. Or it's a terrifying life if you're traumatized and believe that the trauma will occur again. But if you don't believe, if there's no sense of time, if there's no sense of expecting anything, it's a very interesting life. However, if you're a farmer, for example, and there's only one time of the month or one time of the year when you can plant this crop and get a good a good harvest, just saying, let's see what happens when we plant petunias in January. Let's just see what happens. Last year the petunias died in January. The year before that they died in January. But let's just see what happens. Because maybe this year the petunias will feel differently, and so let's see. It's very exciting to, you have no idea, right? Because you have no beliefs. You have no particular expectation. It's every single behavior. I'm going to put hot poker on my skin. It burned, amazing. What will happen next, right? And so, you've got tremendous humility and, and wonder and innocence and experimentation. Every day is a new, a new journey. And so that's what you gain. And you don't have to think and plan about the future because you don't have any beliefs or suppositions, and you don't have to work for the future because the future might work out if you don't work. Maybe we won't plant anything, and maybe an alien spaceship will just come along. We don't know, right? We're just going to see what happens. And so why do people develop beliefs even though they're wrong, even though they're limited? Well, if you believe that planting in April and harvesting in October is going to work out for your crop, and you're relating to your underlying reality, not your cult, which you've watched that pattern, and so you believe that pattern is going to come again. If you don't understand that the house always wins in Vegas, then you might place 100 bets and be curious whether or not you would come away with a lot of money. But if you understand that the statistics in Vegas betting are in favor of the house, that 99% of all people who place 100 bets in Vegas will come away with little or none of the money they started out with, right? And that they bet. And if you know that, then it's not a great wonder. It's not like, oh, I wonder what will happen here. But it does allow you to make a very important decision. Because if you also know that 90% of the people who invest in real estate and hold that real estate for 20 years have the real estate go up in value, that 90% of people who do this have their money go up in value. And if you also understand that most of the time, if you buy something useful with money, your life goes up in value. Well, then these three beliefs, that if money is useful, that real estate is a good investment and that Vegas is a bad investment. These are three beliefs. They're not always right. Every one of them is wrong. There are, among all the history of real estate investors, some people who bought a piece of property and 20 years later was worth less. And there are some people who went to Vegas and came away with a lot more money. And there are some people who got really rich and became depressed and miserable. So every single one of those beliefs are wrong. Now, one could say then that it's useful really to stop turning beliefs into dogmas or absolutes and instead treat beliefs as statistics, to basically say that I want to bet with a winning hand, and 90% of real estate makes money, so I'm going to invest with a 90% odds of success in real estate. And 50% of these people make money, and so I'm going to invest a certain amount in this, but not very much, or I'm not going to invest in that. That 50-50 is not good enough. But there's this other area where 50% of the time it fails, but when it wins 1,000% return on investment. And when it loses, you lose everything. So you lose $10 when you lose, but you get $100 when you win, and it's 50-50. That's a good one. But you don't want to put it all on one bet. To win that one big, you might want to place 30 bets. Because if you have 50-50 odds and you place 30 bets, most of, at least half of them on a 30 bet, thing should work out to where you won 1,000%. So you diversify a little bit because of your risk. And so this is the angel investor model, to pick 20 bets that could all make a lot of money and plan that one of them will. It's a 1 in 20 bet, but you get 1,000 times your money when you pay off. You lose 20%, you lose 19 out of 20, but you get 1,000 times your money back on one. And so if you do that bet with discipline over 10, 20 years, you will make a good chunk of money, and it'll also be very interesting. It'll be educational, and so you have, these are beliefs. So none of them are right all of the time. And each belief captures a certain arena of reality. So, this belief here is capturing temperature and light and sun relationships. That's it. The belief that it gets warmer when the sun is up and gets colder when the sun goes down doesn't tell you about the stock market, doesn't tell you about rivers, doesn't tell you about, but it might tell you about ice. Could say at a certain point when the sun went down, the lake might freeze over, right? So it could tell you some things, but it's a very narrow belief. Now, the next thing to understand is that all beliefs as heuristic models of reality evolve over time. They get refined. Usually, they get subroutines and nuance added to them. They evolve over time. Because you start off with this belief that's black and white. There are good people and there are bad people. That's a belief. And it suggests then you have to find the good people and avoid the bad people. But it's not as useful as a belief that says everyone has sides that can be destructive, and everyone has sides that could be destructive, constructive and destructive. And you want to engage with someone in a constructive way. Those are a couple of different beliefs. But if that yields more sustainable well-being than the belief that there are good people and there are bad people, then that belief will catch on over time if people have the hardware capable of running the belief. Evolution is an evolution of state. So what's behind the drive of all of these changes in technology and culture and beliefs, in thinking and philosophy and religion and all that? What's driving the change, the evolution, is the underlying desire of every human being to feel sustainably better and to avoid feeling chronically worse. So that can be depended on because every human being in the history of humanity, in their weird and twisted way, or in their clear and intelligent way, have wanted to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. And so beliefs are a response to an evolution in state that begins down here at let's say abject, helpless misery, and moves up here to spontaneous, effortless, sustainable joy. To have sustainable, effortless joy, conscious mastery. This is where it's all heading, where it's all at, right? We want to feel great. We want to know how to feel great. We want to know how to feel great tomorrow and the day after that. We want to know how to make variations so that it's interesting and great, that it's great in this way. I'd strawberry ice cream today and cookies and cream tomorrow and pecan the next day. It's not all strawberries and cream for the rest of my life. It's not all harps and angels for all eternity. We've got variety in our difference. So that's where it's all heading. Everyone wants that. And everyone doesn't want that. And so that's driving evolution. It's driving the experimentation. Sympathy, antipathy, synthesis. Sympathy, antipathy, synthesis. Sympathy, antipathy, synthesis. Generation after generation after generation. People want to feel better. And they want to avoid feeling chronically worse. And there's a journey. There's a cycle around that. You can't just take a shortcut. Like, I'm not going to plant the crops because I don't feel like it. I feel better honoring my integrity, and I'm not going to plant corn. Nope. No one can tell me what to do. I am not going to do what I'm told. I'm going to play the violin, right? And so no corn gets planted. And so no corn crop grows in the field. And so no corn is harvested. And, you get a little thin playing the violin over time. And so, maybe I'll be a little bit less independent and go and plant some corn. And see if I'm still alive 6 months later. And so, in a complex reality, of course, someone else can plant the corn, but if nobody plants any corn and nobody plants any wheat and nobody plants any strawberry and nobody makes any investments, then that, reality comes tumbling down. So it's not a very successful belief that, engineering will just magically happen. This cotton turtleneck will just last forever and have a child, and then I'll put on a brand new cotton turtleneck in 10 years. It's not a very useful belief because it doesn't lead to sustainable well-being. So beliefs are driven by this innate drive to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. And so in that sense, they are a part of the technology of state evolution. From helpless despair, loneliness, pain, fear, and misery at the bottom to masterful, conscious joy at the top with little or no energy, sustainable grace. So this is the pinnacle. And point 7, beliefs require an operating system, a skill, a competency to maintain them. Now, all beliefs are right a certain amount of the time, but if you're really good at embodying a belief, you can make a belief work for you better than somebody else can. You could think of it as an operating system. You let's say you went back to the old original Macintosh computer with 280 megabytes of RAM, or kilobytes of RAM, or whatever it was. You went back to there and you tried to load the current Apple operating system or the current Windows operating system. It chokes the machine. The technology is not up to carrying the program. In this case, the belief program just freezes. So it's not useful to give, a computer with 200 kilobytes of RAM, a computer that requires 8 gigabytes of RAM to function. You'd give that a very, very tiny program, like go out of the house and scrounge for food. Could you manage that? Oh, I think I can manage that. Okay, well then do that. That's better than sitting around looking at birds if you don't have a crop on the way. So different operating systems, different skills are necessary to host different belief sets. The more complex your belief system is, and the more accurate your belief system is, and it's helping you, and the more successful, meaning if this belief is right 99% of the time, that's a pretty good belief. Versus a belief that's right 10% of the time and you bet on it 99% of the time and lose everything. So every belief requires a certain skill or ability to sustain it. And if the belief is ahead of the host, it's not going to work. You'd be better off with a cruder, older model of belief that you can run and work with than you are with this wonderful belief system that you just clogs you up. You just can't deal with it. And so that's an important part of this technology is, am I capable of running this belief? And different people also are predisposed. Like you can look at a cult such as the American cult that values youth. So the young body, particularly the young female body, is at the top of the value hierarchy. So way up here, you have the young female body. Now that's in the American cult, because there are other cults that value elders at the top. So it's, up at the top is, the great grandmother or the patriarch, the grandfather. That's up at the top. And this is why it's so important to be aware that there's this ecology of the cult, and then there's the underlying ecology of physics and nature. Now, in a cult that values beauty measured by symmetry of face, in a cult that values white as the good color, in a cult that values youth, in a cult that values big breasts, for example, as superior to tiny breasts. If you're 20 years old, have a symmetrical face, and have big breasts, you can pull off a belief that says, the universe is always giving me gifts and trying to help me, because in the protocol of seeking sex, of seeking association with pleasure, the 20-year-old can get attention. Oh, I'll hold the door. Oh, you need help with your groceries. Oh, you need some money. Oh, you need to drive. I'll drive you 200 miles out of my way. No problem whatsoever. So it's not a difficult belief to hold. But if the same young woman is now 70 years old, doing the exact same thing, the universe always takes care of me, right? Those drivers are looking at the 20-year-old, the next 20-year-old. So the belief doesn't work as well as you get older in a cult that values youth. But if you are in a cult that values the elderly, the elders, then the 20-year-old doesn't get anything and can't hold that belief. But as you move into the majesty of your 80s, suddenly the universe really does take care of you because your tribe, your cult, they open the door, what is your opinion here? Let's give you the best food. Because in your cult, you have the most experience. You have the best memory. So you're going to make the best decision for the tribe. And so the universe really does take care of you as long as you're old. And so it's contextual what beliefs you can pull out in what period of time. But it requires a certain amount of skill and a certain amount of ecological support, shall we say, to have a belief be consistent with reality. Because anyone can come up with a belief. I believe the world always puts me number one. I'm waiting, I'm still waiting. And it's not a very useful belief because it's not predicting what I thought it would predict. In fact, it's causing problems because people think I'm weird for having this belief and waiting and looking, and all this stuff. So it's not a good predictor of reality. 8, there is a hierarchy of belief that is, all belief is hierarchical in the sense that some beliefs in a given environment produce more sustainable well-being with less energy than other beliefs. And so anyone can believe any belief and run any operating system if they have the capacity to load it and hold it and sustain it in their psyche and their body. But there is a gradient where the beliefs up here lead to large amounts of sustainable well-being with low energy consumption. And the beliefs down here consume large amounts of energy and yield very low sustainable well-being. And so you have a range of different beliefs, and they're on a hierarchy of yield because everyone's seeking sustainable well-being and everyone's trying to avoid feeling chronically worse. But different beliefs in a given ecology run on a given operating system will produce that desired outcome more than others. 9, all beliefs are self-perpetuating. Once you believe something, you're making a bet. So you make a bet on table A. You believe that table A is going to be a good bet. So you put money on table A. And because you put money on table A, you're more invested in the belief that table A is a good thing, because you've now, if you believe that you're going to lose all your money, then you got to get your money off. So often beliefs can be addictive. I believe that this is my soulmate. Gee, my soulmate isn't being very cooperative. What can I do now? So I believe that, this is what I should do. So I should try harder. I should put more money on the table. And because we're believing something, one of the functions of a belief is to limit. So we have a tunnel vision phenomena. You see the whole image, and then as soon as you believe something, you're focusing your attention on that probable outcome only. And the more invested you are in your belief, the more you focus on that particular part of reality. And the less you focus on discordant and anomalous data. You say, I know I'm going to win here. But someone says, do you know that there's a 98% chance, 98% of the people who place this bet on this table actually lose money? I don't want to hear that, right? Because I believe that I'm going to win. So this is where it's important to understand that there is a hierarchy of beliefs, and some beliefs that are integrated tightly with data and underlying reality are much more useful than others. So, but they tend to be self-perpetuating in the same way that cultures are self-perpetuating. You say that white people are the best people in a racist cult that's Western. Light and white is godly, and black is the devil, right? It's bad, right? So naturally, of course, the people with white skin have to be better. Now, how does this self-perpetuate? Well, what are the people with black skin? Well, they're animals. Really? They seem kind, intelligent? No. So they can be enslaved? Absolutely, right? They don't need to be educated? Of course not. They're animals. Well, if you enslave people, if you treat them like animals, if you don't educate them, surprise, they don't grow and evolve as rapidly as if you said these were sacred gods, that God is black. God is black. You didn't realize, we got it wrong. God is black. And it's the great nurturing, moist mother, right? It's the beauty of letting go, of forgetting, it's all of this it's so wonderful. God is black. Goddess is black, right? And so then you worship and protect and cherish and feed and give the best meat, etc., to the black people. And then so naturally, they get healthier. They become more educated. They get more money because they all know that, because everyone is agreeing that this is better. So, and when everyone treats you well, you're in a better mood. So you feel happier, and then they say, yeah, you're happy because you're good. No, you're happy because everyone has agreed to believe that you're good and is treating you well. It's not very hard to be happy when everyone's bowing and giving you their money and saying what a privilege it is to be associated and anything I can do to help. It's very, very easy to be creative and all of that in such an environment. So beliefs tend to perpetuate the reality that they believe in. They're a bet. And at a certain point, if lots of people make the bet, for example, if everyone bet that cell phones wouldn't take off, if everyone bet that, they wouldn't have taken off. If everyone believed that landlines would prevail, then why would you go out and buy a cell phone? And if nobody would buy a cell phone, then how could the price come down? And then how could more and more people buy cell phones? And so belief is self-perpetuating because it plays a very prominent role in generating the reality. If everyone agrees that this is the way to do things, then it probably is the way to do things because you're in harmony with a very big network of people that are heavily invested in that way of doing things, and they're going to work very hard to make that network work, even if it's not the best network. Even if it's completely devoid of underlying intelligence. If you have 1 billion people pouring time, money, and energy in making a certain thing work because they believe in it, they'll get it to work to some degree or other. So, some beliefs are more fun and more successful than others. Another way of saying, that certain beliefs will help you in a given state ascend to a higher level of well-being. The beliefs that are most effective at facilitating sustainable survival and are the most fun will prevail out of that underlying drive that we all want to feel better and we all want to avoid feeling worse. And so a belief that helps people have more fun and be more successful at the same time will ascend. Now, sometimes, because there's different forms of fun, and there's also different forms of pain and feeling bad. Now, traumatized people have their number one fear is the fear of change, the fear of being out of control, which is the fear of change, and thus the future and change. So if a belief comes along, if a mode or an identity of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being comes along that is superior, that delivers far better yields in sustainable well-being and consumes less energy, then if a majority of people is traumatized and afraid of the unknown, they will attack it because it's not fun for them and it's not successful to them to lose control as they venture into the unknown. Because for a traumatized person who doesn't know how to deal with their trauma, losing control is the worst thing that they could possibly imagine. So they feel very terrible as the change is presented. But in a non-traumatized cult environment where people are excited about the future and change, when somebody brings in a meme, a belief, an identity that facilitates sustainable well-being and reduces unnecessary waste, this is seen as tremendously wonderful and is rapidly adopted. And in this way, culture and beliefs evolve along with people. As humans and beliefs evolve in competence, so you have the competence of the host, which is like the competence of the computer chip or operating system and body, and then you have the competence of the belief. How sophisticated is the belief? How good at predicting reality is the belief? How frequency? And how important is the reality that predicts? Because a belief that is 100% accurate at predicting how many ants will be born in a given anthill in 1949, never fails, is not as useful in a capitalist cult as a belief that predicts the stock market with absolute certainty in 1949 and every year thereafter. And so this is a competent belief, which is how good is the belief in an area that matters to the host of the belief. If you're an ant, then that belief is very useful. If you're a human being investing in the stock market, then the latter belief is useful. And there is a movement. So both of these are evolving. The host is evolving and the operating system, the beliefs are evolving. Neither are perfect. Each is always on an endless continuum because you can always create more sustainable well-being more efficiently than before. That's an endless continuum. And so you can always have more beliefs, better beliefs, more efficient beliefs, more sophisticated beliefs. This is good except on a Blue Monday. And then with this people and this, and the more sophisticated the belief is at predicting something that really matters, the more you can attune and partner with reality in a way that leads to grace. Hi, I'm Dan Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.